Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing the secrets of fundraising success. And joining me in the studio, well, an old friend of the program, actually, Michael Graham, who was with us around about 2 years ago. We were discussing earlier on, a guy that knows a lot about turning your turnover, your income, making sales and doing all those sort of things. Michael Graham from mjbgraham.com, something like that. You'll explain in a moment. And along with him as well, also for MJB Graham Consultancy, we've got Luke Cruz. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Michael, it's a long time since we've seen you.
Great to see you, Steve.
Fantastic to have you back in the studio.
Yeah, great to be
and
back.
Luke, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, let's kick off with you. So things have really changed. The last time we saw you, what were you doing?
So last time we were on the show, we talked about increasing turnover with the sales consultancy. So working with small, medium-sized businesses and trying to, triple their turnover within a period of time. So that was, I actually checked this before I came here. That was 2 years ago.
Right.
So that was...
It's just good to show me.
Yeah.
And you've been very successful in that area as well, but the company now is diversified, and it seems a lot of organisations, what they're doing, as they grow, they see opportunities, diversify, you bring in the expertise that is needed, and then you expand. So what are you doing now? You're still doing that sales
So the sales company is actually still growing, so we've franchised that. We've got a team of franchisees that help us grow it and do the delivery, and so I just manage that business now. But what happened about similar time that I was on the show last time, a lot of our clients were, companies grow their turnover, they get to a certain level where what they actually need is they need an injection of capital to really take things to another level. So a lot of our clients were coming to us saying, Mike, could you help us find funding? Could you help us find finance? Could you help us really take things to another level? And I'm the kind of person that kind of goes, yes, let's figure this out.
You're the kind of guy that never says no, aren't you?
I'm the kind of guy that never says
I'm just a guy that can't say no.
So long story short, I actually met a lawyer about 3 years ago at one of the events that we run, and she told us about an investment scheme, an international investment scheme that the UK has, and we had a lot of companies looking to raise finance, and one thing led to another, and 3 years later, we're now here. What happened was we started working with a lot of smaller companies. Then we started to get bigger scale projects, and that's where we brought Luke on board about two years ago, 2015, to really help us separate the companies and really help companies to actually, if they're a good company, if they're a strong company, to actually grow their funding and get to another level.
Luke, let's find out a little bit about you, because the nice thing that I've realised about you is that your background as being a business owner. You understand the rigmarole, the problems that small businesses and large businesses have when they're trying to expand and they're trying to grow, because you've been there, you've done that. You had an events organisation. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, what's your background?
My background is I'm American.
Well, we all have our crosses to bear at the moment, and let that one be yours, okay?
Fair enough. Sometimes I like to call myself a rather un-American American.
All right.
Maybe that's a bit better.
Okay.
But no, more seriously, ever since quite a young age, I was actually introduced to the act of raising funds, if you will, by my mother. She used to raise for a lot of various charity causes and other such things. So I think from about 14, that's as early as I can remember it, was, well, we needed to raise some money for something. I was fortunate later in life to actually live in India for a while, and at the age of 23, I set up an event management company. I had seen that the sector was, well, there was space for me, to put it that way. I've now been in the UK for about 3 years, and for the majority of that period, I've been working in the commercial finance sector. So with businesses, with property developers, and with lenders. And so, of course, like Mike said, he had the idea to, well, start a division of the company that helped companies access finance. That was a perfect fit for me, and Michael and I are vision aligned on a lot of levels, and I understand Mike's very entrepreneurial as well. Been setting up companies from a young age.
So you do a lot of the due diligence within the companies, don't you?
I do, yes. It's important for us to, of course, study the business plan, study the proposition, understand what the company is, who they are, and understand their needs and help them to realize the best way to present those needs. Because I think a lot of times when it comes to finance, it's how you present it to lenders, to investors, to your associates, and the presentation can be everything. So yes.
Now, before we go down the route of actually what companies can do when it comes to looking for funding, let's just find out. I mean, the thing is, the situation we've got, there are a lot of businesses that are looking for funding. Do you think the whole funding market over the past 18 months, 2 years, maybe last 5 years, has it really changed? Is it now easier to get funding, do you think? Are there more opportunities out there? Is it more straightforward? Or and what, big question this one, and what are the most common traps that businesses are falling into when they do go looking for funding?
So I think I'll answer the first and Luke can answer the traps one. I think it's, right now, it's probably the best time ever to get funding.
Why is that?
Because there's a lot of money out there. Not necessarily all in the UK, but China's a big market, Africa's a big market in terms of getting investment, getting funding. So there's a lot of money out there. There's funds that specialize in key things. You know, if you've got that business, they'll invest in your business, right? And we're talking all levels, from before commercialization to post-commercialization to growth capital, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of money out there. What you've really got to do, what business owners really need to do, is they need to take time to understand their business, what stage they're at in the investments cycle, and who would be the best people to approach. I think one of the big mistakes we get is people come to us, and I'll let Luke touch on this more, but people come to us with weak business plans, weak return of investments, weak proposition, trying to approach the wrong market for their funding. Right? So you've got, as a business owner, you've got to understand, where am I at in the market in terms of the funding cycle? How strong is my proposition? And if you don't have a strong proposition, that's not bad sometimes. You've just got to be honest with that and approach the right people. But
you're saying sometimes then that the propositions that you see are weak. When you say weak, in what kind of way? Are they entrepreneurs who've got an idealistic dream that they think, you know, the next greatest idea?
The next Facebook.
We call it the next Facebook. And interestingly, we see a few next Facebooks every day.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But no, to answer your question more
No, but that's interesting, isn't it? So, so how do you identify that yourself? Because you're driven by your own passion, you're driven by your own desires, and of course every inventor has thought that theirs is the best mousetrap.
100.
And it must be very difficult. So what do you think would be the key advice to somebody who's putting together? How do you test that? How do you check it?
Excellent question. The advice that I give very often is I just say, keep it simple. Put yourself on the other side of the table. More specifically, would you invest in your idea? For example, the other day I had a meeting with a property developer, and he had a good idea, but what he wanted was 100% funding, this, that, and the other from an investor or a lender, and the reality is we're working on that, but it took a while to explain to him. I said, you do need to look at it from where they're sitting. You want 100% of the funds, you want to develop this, but now you want 50 or 60% of the profit. Or in the cases of technology, the new Facebooks, right? It's great to have an idea, and creative people have the ideas, they put it together, they put in a tremendous amount of effort to bring it to market. Even so, it's important to remember that on any given day, millions of new mobile applications come into the market. I think in the online publication, Forbes.com, it mentioned that 98% of companies, small companies that look for investment, don't get it. Mm-hmm. So I think what it is, it's about being realistic, understanding the market, like Michael said, understanding your product, but most importantly, understanding how the person sitting on the other side of the table, who you asking for funding or for a loan or to invest in your company, how are they seeing it? And I think that simple step makes a big difference.
How many do you turn away? How many people approach you and you feel even you can see straight away that this is not completely formulated, hasn't been thought through?
Well, in the beginning, I'll be honest, Steve, when we first started, because we didn't know what we were doing really, because you don't know what you're doing when you first start, right? We used to take on everybody. So if somebody came, we used to get excited by their idea, because you know entrepreneurs are so excited. They pitch you an idea, you're like, oh wow, this is the next Facebook, right? What we slowly started learning, so now we have a lot of funds that we work with. We actually flip the way we work, and we work more on the funds. So the funds tell us, we want this kind of project. And if a project doesn't come to us matching that criteria, then we turn it away. And there's a few other things. For example, one of the biggest things is the return on investment that a project has to have and the security, right? So a lot of investors, like Luke was saying, they come to the table with a lot of companies, they come to the table with a great idea, great concept, but yet when you say to them, okay, worst case scenario, if everything blows up, what's the return on investment? And number one, good scenario. Number two, bad scenario, what's the security for the investors? And that's the question that a lot of people can't answer. Because you say, what's the security? They go, there isn't one. You go, so...
But I read somewhere, or I heard somewhere, and this may be just vapor thoughts, that most investors, when they go into investing in businesses, we're looking at a failure rate of something like 9 out of 10. I mean, it's quite higher. It's higher, the number of businesses that will fall over as they're going forward. You must be factoring that in as well, because not every one of the businesses that you get funding for is going to be a winner.
Well,
100.
If I may interject on that, since we're on the topic.
In an American voice.
Since we're on the topic of investment, I think one thing we have to make very clear is that we don't advise on the investment aspect. And that's very important. Of course, here in the UK, we have the FCA and their financial regulations, which we have to follow and abide by. So we make it clear to companies that we're not going to advise you on the aspects of the investment, or like you just said, where an investor invests and loses their money. Again, we do not advise on the investment itself. Our role is quite similar, and that's to connect parties. So in the case of institutional private equity funds, we meet with them, we understand the kind of projects they're looking for. They may say renewable energy within the UK. In that case, we may then have a project that fits the description. We simply connect the two. So that's an important point to cover. So we don't advise on the investment aspect. And in the cases of foreign investors or some of the UK's investor visas, again, we don't advise on the immigration aspect. What we do have is a panel or a team of highly recommended immigration lawyers, accountants, forensic accountants, lawyers, and so that when we do bring parties together, if they require further services, regulated services, we connect them to these individuals and professionals.
All right. Listen, hold those thoughts for a moment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more in a few moments' time. We're going to go down the 5 key channels to successfully raise finance, the pitfalls, how to prepare yourself, negotiating the best possible deal, understanding the type of, are we all going to get this all in an hour, and getting the best deal for your situation, and understanding the pros and the cons if you are thinking about getting yourself investment into your business, to your next Facebook perhaps. Then keep watching this edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on the last week's program, we talked to James Potter. He's affectionately known as the LinkedIn man, about why LinkedIn is the most misunderstood social network. See, the programs are very, very diverse right across the board, aren't they? It was a cracking show, as always, with James. He came in, and I think the nice thing about James is his take on how LinkedIn should be used, and also his take on how all the different social media platforms should, in fact, be used, and how they work together, and in some cases, how they don't work together. Now, of course, as well, we've got GDPR coming up now. You may be wondering what that is. I'll tell you in a moment. But why LinkedIn, collecting people's information and all those things is also becoming somewhat misunderstood when we go out there and we're trying to prospect for new clients. But let's look at what happened in last week's edition of the program. It was the LinkedIn man, James Potter, talking all about LinkedIn. Some great advice for you if you are using LinkedIn for prospecting. And just to give you a bit of a tease of what happened in last week's edition of the program, here is James Potter. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing why LinkedIn is the most misunderstood social network. Joining me in the studio today is the LinkedIn man, James Potter.
Most people on LinkedIn joined it because they thought there was something good in there and they could find some nice people to talk to help them develop the business, or to find some more clients, or to do whatever outcome they were trying to seek. But then having got onto it, they couldn't really work out what they needed to be doing. I think it comes down to me with context. I don't think people have got the context of LinkedIn quite right, and then they consequently don't do quite the right things and it doesn't quite work for them. I think a lot of people would like you to think it's a lot harder than you realise. I think for me it's about helping people to bring the barriers down. Actually, because they think it's things it's not, it makes it difficult for them to talk to people and make it work as it should. There's something I often refer to on LinkedIn called the love trap, which is people want to feel loved. You know, I want people to like it or to comment on it or engage with it or whatever it might be. You know, I want to get X people signed up for something free, whatever. They sometimes forget to look at actually why are they there, where are they trying to get to, is it getting them where they're trying to get to? I think the number of good people that you really know make a difference on LinkedIn. That might be different to how you perceive a connection. A connection on LinkedIn is just a bit of data, it's information about somebody. Whereas when you really know them, you can pick up the phone to them, you can talk to them, they'll share insights with you, they'll help you if you ask, etc. So for me, there's a very big difference between a connection on LinkedIn and a relationship with somebody. They're not all the same. They're all different. I often draw the analogy of a bit like a foreign language. Each platform works in a particular way, a particular style. Some message types work better than others on different platforms. Some are very visual, some are very interactive, some are very conversational. The audience demographics are different, the frequency of use is different. Sometimes you have to talk in code to make some of them work. Sometimes the messages are long, sometimes the messages are short. They're not the same. I think some people think that there are other social platforms people don't look at, and I appreciate different social platforms. You can lock down different settings, I understand all that. But I think anybody that's trying to find out about you will look for you on the platforms that you're on to see what they can see. I think the days of thinking what you put out there in the public domain isn't public are long gone. Probably the most common one is that they're trying to get their message out to people. So what they do is connect with everybody that they can, because they think by doing that it will get their message out to a wider audience. Now the reality of that is the message will appear in front of as many connections as they've got, but that may not necessarily get it to a wider audience. The core thing to think about with LinkedIn in terms of the social platforms, LinkedIn is not social media, right? It is a social network. It is about people that you genuinely know in real life. The reason for that is because I want you to start refocusing your business expansion efforts from being the people you're connected to the people that your connections know. Those people you could get introduced to or referred to, for example. My name is James Potter, although more people call me the LinkedIn man than call me James. I spend my entire life running around the world, talking on stage and teaching people how to turn LinkedIn into the outcomes they seek, which is most often more sales or income or press or profile or whatever it might be. The key takeaways of today's conversation were actually around being authentic on LinkedIn, being you. You are the best person to be you, and you need to be in your LinkedIn profile. All those reasons that clients say they like about working with you, that personality, that style, that belief, that behaviour, that values needs to be in your profile. We also talked about the importance of connecting with good people, nice people that you know, not people that might be useful one day. That's a trap. We also talked about not getting hung up on numbers. It's not about the number of connections, the number of people that see the message. It's actually around thinking around the outcome and what difference does LinkedIn make to that outcome that you're trying to reach. And we also talked about the importance of talking to people, getting the word out there, putting words in mouth to help people get word of mouth working for you. Talk to people, say what you're up to, share some stories of some of the impacts that you're having. That's the main things I want you to take away and do a bit different.
James Potter there, the LinkedIn man, a fantastic show. If you are using LinkedIn at the moment, I do suggest that you watch the entire program, all 60 minutes, some great advice and a great process for you to follow to make certain you get the most out of using LinkedIn when it comes to prospecting in your business. And by the way, if you like a program like that one or like this one, maybe you're trying to get something that maybe you want to get out to your audience, to your customers, maybe an internal one for your staff, you want to engage more with them, then a program like this would be absolutely ideal. What we can do, we can brand the studio, we can customize it, and we can put together a TV show just like this one for your business. Think about it for a moment. We all go onto different websites, we all have these sign-up forms to say, sign up here for this, that and the other, for a newsletter. Now, you've already got a page, you've got pages of text that people can read. So that's going to connect with them. So you send them now a newsletter and they're really going to read that, aren't they? Yeah, right. What you want to do is you want to send them something that's interesting and compelling. And a program like this is exactly what we're talking about. And you could do maybe a series of them very quickly. Get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live and we'll advise you the best way to do that. It's dead easy to do that. Just drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com if you prefer. We'd rather prefer it to if you pick the phone up and give us a call. The telephone number is 01784 256 777. You can follow our stream of consciousness or send us a direct message on Twitter at BCLTv. And don't forget, you can also follow us on Facebook and watch the programs on Facebook, leaving your comments. I think a couple of weeks back, there was one program that went out on Facebook, and before the end of the show, it had over 1,000 views. So thank you very much for that. Facebook Live is very, very powerful for SMEs, entrepreneurs, businesses that want to get their message out there. To a certain extent, YouTube, while it's a great platform, technically, I think they've actually got to come up with another game changer, because I think Facebook really are just getting there at the moment. But a great way, once again, anyway, to get your message out there. It's a great platform to use. So if you want to, then you can find out more details there. Incidentally, there are over 200 hours worth of programs for SMEs, entrepreneurs and small businesses at the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Go along there, fill in one of our forms, and then we'll pester you with spam for the rest of your life. No, we won't. Promise you we won't. But we will give you some great advice on how you can turn your communication into effective communication. That's what it's all about. If you're watching this, then you've obviously got an interest in business. Go to the website, because we want to share that interest with you to make you better than you are now. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company. We're live on a Monday at lunchtime, and joining me in the studio today is Michael Graham and Luke Cruz of MJB Graham Consultancy. Let's look, shall we, at the different forms of funding that is out there. I mean, some would say there's just a couple. So, I mean, there's 5 core ones, aren't there? Michael?
So there's about 5. So, for example, you've got grants, which actually a lot of businesses are entitled to a grant, and there's many different places to go for a grant. There's the UK grants. There's a website called euforfinance.com, which is an amazing platform to find grants from the EU, right? It's amazing.
While we're still in it.
While we're still in it, right? So hurry up.
Yes. The door shuts in 2 years' time. Yes.
But the grants are great. Loans are great. And I'm not just talking about your direct banks, because there's many other places that you can get loans from.
I mean, there are business loans available that are backed by the government as well, aren't there?
And there's tiers. For example, you've got tier 1 loan providers, you've got tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Obviously, it's going to, change the deal, but there are different people to go for loans. You've got foreign investment schemes. The UK has many foreign investment schemes, which we can explain. There's your VCs, so angel investors, and then you've got more sort of your private investors, right? But 5 amazing channels where if you can get your proposition, like Luke mentioned earlier, if you can get your proposition right and your explanation right and your pitch right, getting the funding shouldn't be too difficult.
Which do you think is the most underutilised? And the reason I ask that, I find it really interesting. There are all these loans that are available out there. For instance, we had I think it was a sustainability grant.
Yeah.
And we were able to get a PC on that.
Yeah.
Because we fitted the criteria, what we were trying to do with it. And it was a grant that was completely out of the blue. And I spoke to Linda, she who must be obeyed here, and I said to her, well, can we have a look at that grant? And she was of the opinion initially that it would be a lot of paperwork to get that particular grant.
Yeah.
It was a 2-sided sheet.
Yep.
Yes.
And it came through like that.
Yeah.
So those grants are truly available out there. What kind of value for them?
Absolutely, if I may.
Yeah.
At last count,
Very polite,
there's about 500 national and regional grants and loans in the UK. And most people that I tell that to are quite surprised. They say 500. And I say, well, yes, many are sector specific. It could be for the fishermen in the northeast or wherever. So yes, a number of them are designated to certain geographical areas or certain commercial sectors. That said, there's still a substantial amount of government incentives available for businesses. The most overlooked one, I would say, is the startup loans program, which is easily available. As you yourself said, it's quite straightforward. You dial in on the line, they give you advice, they assign a business development manager to you, and you may qualify for up to 20,000 in funding for a startup business, and often, in most cases, it's just an idea. They haven't started turnover. So a lot of businesses, we advise, look at what the government's put out there for you. Spend some time researching it, or really, that's what we offer to do for them. So there's the startup grants, then there's the sector grants, there's other things, for example, like R&D tax back, which is if you spent money on research and development, the government has an incentive there as well. So this is what we bring to the table. We help them look at all the various options, what suits best for them. There's the EU grants, and then certain financial institutions also target certain sectors, like we were saying earlier, renewable energy or fintech, biotech. So our initial job is to understand the company, understand the client, and make them aware of the various financial options, and then the proper order in which you can approach them. For example, some grants are only for companies over 2 years old, or over 3. So it's important to plan your financial process from the beginning. Start with startup loans. We're going to go to the EU funds for our next project. 2 years down the line, we're going to go to an expansion fund. Then we're going to claim our R&D tax back. Then we're going to be in a great position to go to private equity investors, etc., etc.
Which kind of leads on to the pitfalls, doesn't it? Do companies do that? Do business owners do that? Do they plan like that? So how often do you have somebody coming in where maybe they've missed opportunities because they haven't thought it through? Do you see that?
Absolutely, we do see that, yes. What I would say is that creative people are very talented
at creating.
In creating, and we see some fantastic business ideas, concepts every day. And while some people have it all, isn't that the dream? Where they're very creative, they've got excellent business management, they've got good connections, good networks, and they can do it by themselves. Credit to them. But in a lot of cases, the creator is focused on his or her idea, on what they've spent a lot of time developing and bringing that to market, to the point where they may overlook some of these other points. So we really position ourselves to assist the business owner. You look after what you specialize in, what you're passionate about, and we'll do the same.
Now, there's obviously going to be other organisations that are doing exactly what you do, but do you think, Michael, in your particular case, I mean, you've got more front than Harrods has. I mean, but seriously, what you can do, you can pick the phone up, can't you? You can pick the phone up and you can communicate and you can talk. You know how to do that. Is that something that you think is lacking in startup businesses, in entrepreneurial driven enterprises, that they don't have that front, they don't have that expertise to pick the phone up and to ask for what's available out there for them?
I think it's not so much they don't have the expertise, I think it's just the time, isn't it? Like when you're running a business, you've got so many things to do, and this is why a lot of our clients come to us, because they say, look, I'm busy running my business. I don't have time to go and try and raise funding or find a loan or find a grant or find investment or do the research or do everything. I need someone to help me. So that's when we really bring, the value train. And I think finding investment or finding a loan, if you don't know where to go, if you haven't done your research, if you've got time to do it, if you've got time to do your research, if you've got time to really evaluate your situation, great, go for it. But if you don't, whether you work with us, whether you work with someone else, it's worth doing it, but it's also worth doing it with people that are credible. You got to do your research on people, but people that are credible, because otherwise what's going to happen, and this is a big mistake that a lot of businesses make, is they go to every single networker, broker, consultant in the market, and it's kind of a throw stuff at the wall approach, where they give it their business, their baby, they give their baby to someone, to everyone, and then those people go and give it to everyone, and then what happens is your business gets a name in the market for someone who's trying to actively raise funds or raise loans. That doesn't sit well. Once people start to get a hold of your name, that you're consistently always doing that, they start to think, why is your business always trying to do that, right? At some point you should... Perception. So,
Absolutely.
And that's where as well, a business will get a bad deal from an investor or from a loan provider if they've heard from someone else that you're looking for money. They know you're desperate, so then they'll squeeze you on your deal, right? So it's better if you're going to work with someone like us or someone else, that you really understand who you're going into bed with, so to speak, because you don't want the scattergun approach. You want a laser-focused approach where it's send it to one person, get feedback. Send it to one more person, get feedback. You don't want your business or your project being thrown out.
Surely it's all into preparation, and we were saying that some of these business owners don't have time for even time. But if they step back for a moment before they come and see you, it's all very well rocking up at your door and going, it's a bit like, going to your account with a bag of receipts, isn't it? You don't want to be doing that. You want to have some focus in what you're trying to achieve.
100.
So what would you suggest then to a business owner? How, prior to coming to talk to you or somebody like you, how should they be preparing their business themselves for that initial meeting? Before they walk in the door, what are those key things that they need to have in place to make your job easier and also to put them in a better position to get the funding that they actually require?
So I'll touch on two things, then I'll let you. But I think first thing is they've got to think about the return on investment for their investors.
Now,
right?
we say that's the ROI. We say
ROI.
that. So what do you mean by that?
So for example, you got to think about it, right? If you're going to ask for, let's say, 100 grand, right? A, how much money are you going to give back to someone? B, what's going to be the period that you're going to give the money back? So for example, let's say I give you 100 grand for a 5-year period investment. I would probably want maybe 15% per annum on my investment for it to be worth my while, right?
But is it not, looking at 15%, but the way things are at the moment over 5 years, if you could get the £100,000, but a loan, you may get a loan for cheaper than that.
You may get a loan cheaper than that, right? So it comes down to the deal that you're going to make, right? This is the point. So the reason I mentioned 15% is because we have a fund who invests in biotech businesses. They go in at 5 mil, but they look for 15% every year. But they'll invest in businesses that are pre-commercialization. So those businesses would never get a loan. So coming back to the return on investment thing, you've got to really think, how long is going to be my investment period and how much am I willing to pay someone?
And would that be 15% on a yearly basis, or would they be looking for 15% return after 5 years?
It ranges per people, right? But you've got to think, this is the point I'm making here, when you go to the market, you've got to think, what's the deal that I'm going to be willing to put out? Because people are going to counteract your deal, right? And when you're looking for money, if someone, let's say I say, okay, I'm willing to pay an investor 5% per annum, right? And someone comes to you and says 7. I'll give you all the money and I'll give you 7. What do? You shouldn't take the deal because well, it depends, but you shouldn't take the deal because you've kind of gone to market already. A lot of companies don't even have that thought process. They haven't even done it. So when they get the feedback, they get so excited and then they get into bed with a bad deal, right? So I think from my end, that's the biggest thing. I mean, documents, but,
Well, to answer your question specifically, I would say something that's very valuable is proof of concept. Now, obviously that requires finances, but, if you're going to a person, a company with an idea, that's great. Let's hope it's a great idea. But if you could show them how you already put that idea into practice and that it's generating revenue, it's operating profitably, that makes a huge difference. Proof of concept. But I would take it a step back. When we work with our clients here in London, the SME sector, we charge them a small fee up front. And what that fee guarantees them is that we'll work with them for 12 months, which is renewable. The reason I bring it up is because we're not telling them be ready and come to us. We're saying come to us, we'll sit down with you, we'll read your executive summary, your cash forecast, your business plan, and we'll start work from there. A lot of my time is spent just looking at business plans, returning my suggestions, feedback, what we can change, what we can add to it. So we actually encourage companies, because like Michael touched on earlier, it's quite daunting. You've just set up a business, maybe you've invested a lot. You don't really have time to, learn these things or prepare these things, but at the same time you need the finances.
So they can come to you effectively and they can sort of say, look, get us in the right position. Listen, hold the thought once again for a moment. I hope you're finding today's programme a fascinating insight into the ways that you should be going about looking to get that funding for your organisation. Still more to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. Great as always to have your company with us. Two great guests, Michael and Luke, in the studio with me today. We're live on a Monday at lunchtime. It's very hot. If you could see, I'm wearing swimming trunks just below the table at the moment. Just try not to get too excited about that. We've even left the air conditioning on, completely naked below the table, Michael. So you're in a. What were you doing yesterday? Ironman yesterday.
Yeah, Ironman. Hence the
Hence the
scratch
scars.
on the face,
What did you do? You rode your bike into a what?
Yeah, basically into a bush.
Yeah.
You know, first hill coming down.
It's the bush jumped out. Somebody just said the bush jumped out at him and attacked him there. It's all down to forethought and steering. I'll come back a little bit later on. Listen, as we said, we're talking about raising funds for your business today. Another area that you should be contemplating as well within your organisation, within your business, is those goal settings. The ultimate guide to goal settings. We had Ben Chai on the programme. That was in October of last year, in fact. Goal setting for achievements of personal and business success has been for decades. So yet, in spite of many people writing their goals down, they still fail to achieve them. What, Ben asked, is the secret to goal setting that successful people have? What are the key secrets? How do you set your goals in life? But some advice right now on Business Connections Live. Here's Ben Chai.
I've run a lot of businesses that have sold and in different industries, in security, in tech, in education, training, and property. The things that I would like people to remember most is, one, create a bucket list of everything you want to do. Choose the top one. If you haven't read all my articles on how to divide them, just choose one in that list, the one that you really want to achieve. Then break it down, chunk it down into little achievable components. Yes, that will create help you create a specific time scale for you. Do one thing a day, every day, in your list of things in your life that helps you move closer to your goal, and then have a great support team. Sideline anybody who doesn't support you, and just embrace all the people who just want, every time you do a success, they're saying, yes, great, let's go celebrate, let's go to the pub, let's have a cup of coffee, let's have a piece of cake, whatever. Have them in your life, because they are the team that you will bounce off when you're, and I promise you, this is a sport and you'll have down times and you'll be feeling terrible. Those guys will support you and help you move on. Have some kind of education, coaching, whatever person in your life to keep you on track. The biggest thing that people need is accountability. So you have someone who will phone you up. Have you done your goals for the week? Yes. So those are the main steps. Please come to 5 years to financialfreedom.com, because I've written about all of that stuff in great detail, and it's all there freely available for you.
He is just such a great bloke. There's no two ways about it. Ben Chai, he often pops into the studio, and he's one of those kind of guys that when you're sitting listening to him, you just sit there with your mouth open slightly and dribble, because everything that he says is absolutely fascinating. And you think, yes, is it common sense? Yes, it is. Do we know what he's about to say? Yes, it is. As he asks a question, you feel your skin creep a couple of inches because you think to yourself, should have thought of that. If you get an opportunity, do watch the entire programme from Ben Chai. As I said, it was Business Connections Live 154, went out on the 31st of October 2016. You can see it on the website at businessconnectionslive.com. You're watching Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Michael Graham and Luke Cruz of MJB Graham Consultancy. We're talking about fundraising for your business, how to get yourself in the right position to actually get some of the funding that is available out there. There seems to be a lot of funding, a lot of money actually splashing around at the moment. I mean, we kind of touched on it there just a moment or so ago. Negotiations, how you go about negotiating the best deal. We've all now seen Dragon's Den, God help us all, and I'm still amazed that people go in there and do not have a firm grasp of their business and do not have a firm grasp of their figures. Now, yes, it's television, and yes, it's done for entertainment. We understand that. But do you ever find yourselves in that situation when people come in that they too don't have a grasp of what their business is about, what the money's all about, how much they want to give away of their business, and if they even understand what giving away a bit of their business is about? It's better to have, you know, 60% of something as opposed to have 90% of nothing. So do you come across those problems, and have we been indoctrinated by the likes of Dragon's Den so that we do not negotiate very well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think how would we answer that question? I think a lot of what happens is, like Luke had mentioned earlier, a lot of people, if you're creative, specifically tech, right? You see the Snapchat, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world, right? And everybody thinks they're going to be the next Facebook, the next Twitter, the next Snapchat, and that's awesome. You know, high five, good luck, let's hope you are, right? But the reality
Up
is...
above, down below, below. Yep.
But the reality is, if you don't have a strong idea of your finances, you've got to understand what you're willing to give up, what you won't give up, what's non-negotiable to you. You know, when we meet companies, for example, there's one way that we raise investment, which is through foreign investors, where they could do the investments as a loan, or they could do it through equity, right? And the business owner sometimes is like, okay, well, which one do I really want to do? Do I want to do equity? Do I want to do loan? And when they look at it, they then understand which one's better for them.
When people look at equity, is there a fear that they will lose their business? Is that the fear all the time?
I mean, no business owner wants to give up control. I think that's the key thing. But I think they have to understand, for example, if you do an equity investment, and again, this is not something that we would advise people, we don't advise on this is between them and their lawyers, but we understand how it works, and in an equity deal, there's different types of shares that someone could buy. So someone could buy shares in your business which don't give them any voting rights in your business. So they could have 20% of your company, but yet you still have full control. So but again, we wouldn't advise on this because, you know, this is not our role. Our role is just to connect people. But
you introduce people and you identify where
but
particular
I think from a business point of view, if they're going to do an equity, if they're going to do an equity deal, understand what you want to get out of that equity deal. You know, for example, there's some companies that do give away, you know, some voting rights. They give away some voting rights because they're getting a person in their business who's so experienced in the field. There's a match made so perfectly that it makes sense for that person to have a say in how the company's run. Not a huge say, but to have a say. And some people bring in someone who, in all honesty, they're just coming in for the investment. It's still an equity investment, that's still fine, but they don't need to have voting rights, right?
What do you think, Luke?
Well, I think, again, I touched on this earlier, I think it is very important at times where, like you said, you're negotiating a deal, you're discussing equity, contracts, agreements. I think it's at those times where you do need to bring in the expertise of regulated professionals for this. Where our clients requested of us, we have a number of firms that we work with where we could put them in touch with an accountant to analyze it. Yes, we may have an opinion, we may share that, but I always encourage the clients, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. What I mean by that is pre-revenue, you're opening an expensive office on Mayfair, but then you're not going to pay an accountant or a lawyer to look over your documents. That's what I mean by it. It's important to prioritize, do the right things, and many entrepreneurs don't want to spend that money. But they're the reason the Financial Conduct Authority has regulated professionals to ensure that you get a good deal, to ensure you're not done wrong. So that's a very important part as well. When it comes, we work with them to bring them to the point where there's funding. Now, when you've reached this funding point, you need to take it seriously. We're happy to connect you to lawyers, accountants, or if you have your own, you need to present it to them, spend the money, and make sure you're getting the best deal.
I mean, that's a very good point, actually. You know, one of our first deals we did was with an IT training provider in the UK, in London, and we ended up finding 500,000 for them, split. Some of it was loan money, some of it was equity investments through our foreign investment scheme, through our foreign investment route. They managed to get their 500,000. Now, the gentleman spent 10 grand in getting his business plan, his accounts, his documents, all verified through a third party, and the deals went through, and he got 500,000. So, is it worth spending 10 grand to get $500,000? Probably is. But where a lot of people we see is they go, ooh, I don't want to spend that money, but yet they ask for $500,000.
So we definitely encourage doing it the right way, work with professionals. Like I said, we bring you to the point. At that point, we say, have the professionals look over it.
Yeah.
All
Make
right.
sure it's sound.
Okay, so get someone to look at it, work with somebody who understands what they're trying to achieve. What about timescales? I mean, how long does this normally take? A lot of people, do people tend to leave it a little bit too late to be looking for the cash? Do you find that whenever they're approaching you, they're actually under a lot of pressure, and they don't have the time available that ideally they need? Yeah,
I think so we touched on earlier the 5 different routes to find it, channels to finding the investments. Some of them can be very fast. For example, Luke heads up the commercial desk. If the paperwork's done on that, you can get a deal through in 3-4 weeks. Right? It's not that difficult. The foreign investment scheme, the quickest we've ever done the deal through is 2.5 months, but on average, they take 6-9 months, right? On average, you've got to give yourself a timeline. I think outside of commercial finance, you've got to give yourself a timeline of 6 to 9 months. 6 to 12, 6 to 9, but you've got to give yourself that timeline. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to rush through the process, and like Luke said, you're going to not approach professionals sometimes. You're going to miss little key points, and you might get the deal, you might not get a deal you like, and worst case scenario, you might spend all that time and come up with nothing.
Sometimes, though, you're going to find that a business, due to its own inherent success, or maybe it's the way it's moving forward in its own right, may want that money quicker because it's been unplanned.
Yeah.
The progression, the way the company is growing, all of a sudden demands that. What do they do in that particular case? Is this now the wrong route to be going? Should they be looking elsewhere for that to raise the capital?
Well, if I may answer that, I think it goes back to planning. If you're finding yourself in that situation, it's probably because you didn't plan the growth of the business and the expansion properly.
So we slap them on the back of the legs. So what do they do at that point then? So they now find themselves where they didn't plan at the very beginning because they didn't expect it to be such a success, and they do now have a shortened timescale. What do they do?
Well, again, that's where we'll work with them.
Panic, thank you. So that's the honest answer. It's all very well you just sitting there and your calm tones going, but that's that. So they just panic.
Well, once
they're failed. That's it.
Once they're done panicking, which, it can happen. It can happen. Maybe a cold drink will help you calm down. But once you're done that, well, then we've got to deal with the situation that we have. Yes, we have a shortage of time. Yes, we have this requirement. What are the options on the table? And get back to work. In the case of a property developer, Michael referred to commercial finance a few times, and we work with a lot of property developers around the UK. In a case like that, maybe they got the opportunity to purchase a piece of land. They don't have the funds. They're in a bit of panic, as we touched on. Well, in that case, we have a panel of lenders who fund 100% of property development costs through a joint venture model.
And is that going to be across all industries, do you think? So we're talking there about property development.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a big asset. So you're raising money against the potential of an asset.
Yes.
So, but when it comes to intellectual property, IP, that you're raising money against, that's a bit more airy-fairy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, earlier you said that the business was doing very well. That's why now they've reached a point where they need more funding. Now, earlier in the topic, we touched on proof of concept. So I would say if the business is in that position and they're doing so well and they're expanding so fast and need more funds, it would come across as an attractive proposition to investors, angel investors, venture capitalists, or maybe the larger private equity funds.
So they could actually, in a reduced timescale, they could probably actually get the funding that they needed.
And this is where I think the foreign investment scheme is really good as well, because let's say you've got a tech business that's booming, it's doing really well, and we constantly come across candidates who have very good experience in different sectors. So you then match the business. Now for business, a lot of these candidates, they're looking for a company that's growing, a safe company, something exciting, right? And if you make that match can happen very, very fast. And then again, it's like what we mentioned earlier. When you go to markets, how to pitch your business, how to make the proposition. If you make the proposition to that particular channel in a positive way, that my business is growing, it's expanding, we're winning contracts, we're doing this, it can happen very quickly.
All right, listen, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more in just a few moments' time, getting the best deal for your situation and understanding the pros and cons. So we've talked about many of the pros, but what are the cons? We'll be looking at that in just a few moments' time. My guest in today's edition of the program is Michael Graham and Luke Cruz of MJB Graham Consultancy. You're watching Busiess Connections Live. Great to have your company with us as always. Don't forget, you can support the channel. There are a number of ways. I'll give you two of them right now. The first one is via Patreon. We'd like to thank the team at Patreon who've just actually done a rebrand. Without telling anybody and just launching it on us all. But Patreon is a great way. You can go along, you can support our particular channel. Simply just go along to our website at businessconnectionslive.com, find the orange banners, click on those. They'll take you to the appropriate pages. You'll see the logo all over the place. Click on the logo. Now, when you click on the logo, it'll take you to a page like this one. And we have a number of rewards down the right-hand side of the page. Those rewards, so if you think the programs are useful and you'd like to support them, then $5, you get mentions on the program. If you are a corporate client, then you can invest a lot more and get yourself maybe a series of programs, especially for your organization. You'll be featured on the channel. You could also be featured on our website as well. You can support us on Patreon. It's dead easy to do that. Simply go along to our website at businessconnectionslive.com and then follow the links, and who knows, you could be a brand new channel sponsor right here with us. And the message we want to send out to everybody is, here it comes, support us on Patreon. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is also by your advice and also your recommendation. We are obviously on iTunes as well. As I said, we're on Facebook Live, we're on Roku, we're on Stitcher, we're on Blueberry, the list goes on. But we're on iTunes. iTunes is probably one of the biggest single podcasting platforms in the world. Millions of people have access to programs like this one around the world. Thousands of you are downloading Business Connections Live on iTunes on a monthly basis. But we'd like more people to download it and to watch the programs. And the way that iTunes recommends the programs to somebody else is from your recommendations. Now, it's easy to do that as well. Just go into your iTunes account. You'll be able to see that you can view the program in iTunes. That will take you to this tab here that says Ratings and Reviews. Click on that. Once you've clicked on that, then go down here, write a review, give us 5 stars, tell us how great you think Michael Graham is, give him 5 stars, tell him that the scars make him look a little bit more sexy perhaps, but recommend the program on the content and the information that we give, and that would really help us. And what happens then is that when somebody else watches another business program, our program will then be recommended as well. But as I said, thousands of you already are downloading Business Connection. And sometimes you see that people on TV, they say that thousands of you are downloading the program, so I'd like to thank you very much indeed. And it's not true. Let me tell you right now, thousands of you are downloading the program every single month, and that is true. So if you'd like to be part of the success of Business Connections Live, then please download the program, tell us how much you like the show, and if you hate the show, tell us how much you hate the show. Tell us what you like about it, tell us what you'd like to see in the program. You get all the show notes with it. Just go to iTunes. It's as easy and as straightforward as that. You're watching Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Michael Graham, Luke Cruz of MJB Graham Consultancy, and we're into the last segment of the show. I don't know where the hour's gone. So then, getting the best deal for your situation, understanding the pros and cons. Yeah. What do you think, Michael, the key pros are then?
I think there's different pros for the different channels, but I think if we focus, for example, on the foreign investment scheme, right? I think one of the great pros, and it's probably the thing that makes it very different to every other channel that you can raise finance from, is you are tapping into a network where that individual has a lot of influence. I'll give you an example. So my other company, when I was at the show last time, we've recently placed an investment of $250,000 into that business, Chinese candidate, through this scheme. And long story short, his mum is a super high net worth individual, works with Shell. She's already started connecting us to companies in China to help us win contracts out there, right? Now, I would never have got that opportunity through the other investment channels, right? So I think that is one of the biggest positives with that scheme, is that you can tap into a network that you would never have the opportunity to tap into otherwise. With the others, more generic, I think pros is you got to look at where you can get the best deal in terms of the interests and in terms of the security and things like that. But I think stand out, what do you think?
I was going to say, any further pros, do you reckon, Luke?
There is, but before that, just for the clarification for the audience, foreign investment scheme, as Michael uses the term, is a term that we have put to refer to funding that comes from private foreign investors. Now, how do we do that? We have a few partner firms in India, in various parts of Africa. They're usually wealth management firms. They have clients that are looking to invest in, say, a film production company in the UK. Yeah. Why in the UK? We don't know, but there are some countries that are having currency issues, where their currency it devaluating at a rapid rate. And many of those people would like to park their money in a relatively safe place. So no, they may not be coming to you looking, to take the whole company or to get astronomical returns. Maybe their priority is to invest in a sector they like and to safeguard their funds. In another scenario, the UK has a visa scheme for highly entrepreneurial, highly qualified foreign investors who wish to come to the UK, invest their personal funds in a UK business, and also invest their own expertise into building that business and essentially creating more jobs and benefiting the country as a whole. And I think that's what you were touching on. Many of the people we're talking about have masters, PhDs. They're very, very qualified people, and they are inspired by the prospect of coming to the UK and running their business here. And as someone who's worked in different parts of the world, I can honestly say that the business environment, although it could always be improved, is fantastic in the UK. It's well regulated, there's fantastic opportunity, and I think a lot of the people watching this show might be surprised at how many qualified investors who would come and work within their own business and help them build their maybe small and medium-sized business into a global entity.
Do you think, just asking off the cuff, I mean, there's very much at the moment that's where we are. Do you think that circumstance may change?
No, I don't. I think with the I think with the foreign investment scheme, especially somewhere like China, which is predominantly our main market, the UK, regardless whether it's whatever happens in the EU, out of the EU, wherever it does, it has a certain, London specifically as well, holds a certain image to the world. And I think in China, that image is massively influential, right? So I think we don't see it as that much of a problem. In fact, we see it potentially almost as a benefit to this, because they won't be able to go via EU to come into the UK. They'll have to come directly to the UK. I don't think.
To be honest, I choose not to speculate. What I do like to look at is what do we have at our disposal? Let's work with it. Will it be here tomorrow? I don't know. So let's work with what we have.
All right. I love it. Let's not speculate. All right then. Let's look very briefly then at the cons.
Yeah.
The cons very briefly, because we're running out of time actually.
Yeah.
So briefly, cons, Michael.
I think cons is, depending which channels you're going to go through, if you don't have a clear plan to pay back the money, i.e. the loan or the investments, you could see yourself in big trouble. If you don't have a clear game plan with your business, if you, for example, let's say you write something in the business plan, but that's not your real execution plan, and somehow you can't pay back the money, you've got yourself a big, big problem. And I think that's where, finding finance, finding loans, finding grants, finding all of this can be super extractive, super sexy, it's great, it's going to boom my business, but if you don't have an execution plan to actually grow your business with that money and pay it back, you're in deep water.
Anything to add to that, Luke?
I would. Along the same lines, I might say that it's important to, like I said in the beginning, put yourself in the shoes of the person on the other side of the table who you want to invest in your business. And by that I mean we get a lot of business plans, which are great, and they cover the idea and how it's the next Facebook, but then often it ends there. And there's no further section explaining what's in it for the investor, why they should get involved, what they could possibly get out of it, or what they could be a part of. So it's important to have a well-rounded presentation, which we touched on in the beginning, and then to have supporting information in place. We encounter a lot of situations where now there's a party interested in this company and they say, okay, can we see 3 years accounts? Something's out of order, right? We don't have a forecast. So this is why, again, we get in early, we help them work, we say, you've got to prepare the presentation, you've got to have the supporting material, so that when you reach this point, you don't have the con of not having it.
Yeah.
Now, we asked at the beginning, I nominated one of you to give the key takeaways, and that's going to be you, Michael. Okay. Congratulations. So it's the key takeaways to actually what we've been talking about today on the programme. Straight down camera number one is your camera, at least I hope it is. Straight down camera number one, and just don't forget to say who you are, where you're from, and the key takeaways from today's programme.
Fantastic. So my name is Michael Graham. I'm one of the senior partners at our investment consultancy firm, MJB Consultancy, and on today's show, thank you to Steve, we talked about the 5 core channels to raising finance or funding for your business. And those can be loans, grants, foreign investment schemes, private equity houses, or high net worth individuals. And those are things that we can help you and your business to grow to the next level. If you're interested, check out our website, www.mjbconsultancy.com, or drop me an email at michael.graham@mjbgraham.com, and we can have a complimentary 30-minute conversation to see how we could help you, making your investment dreams become a reality.
Ding! Compliment. I like the idea of that. If you do want to go to the website, it's a cracking website actually, at mjbconsultancy.com. Here's the website right now. You can see here there's some good blogs on there as well, contact details, what else, what they're covering up here. There's a bit about them, a bit about investment and the investors, immigration as well, depending what part of the world you're from. You can see from United Kingdom all the way down to Australia and other countries, different sectors as well, property, media, and all the contact details. But once again, a good site to actually go on to, and I think you'll find it really, really interesting website to go on to. It's been a fascinating show actually, and I hope you've got a lot out of it. Do you think there's anything that we've missed out? We've worked our way through all the key questions. Do you think there'd be one thing that perhaps that, I mean, I thought it was really interesting, the warning that you gave, that it is all about forward planning. It is all about understanding. Have you seen that? Have you seen it go a bit peaked on?
Do you know what? I mean, final story, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but when we first started, we were working with two companies, TV production companies, and both who came to us to become clients to raise money through this investment scheme. One of the companies took the investment and the initial $250,000, and they ended up booming because of they used the money very well. They're now winning TV contracts with Sky, BT Sports, and they are flying. The other company we touched base with, they didn't take the money. They needed money at that time. They didn't take the money, and they're now in a position where they're scrapping to win small-time contracts just to keep themselves going. So I think sometimes in life you've got to open yourself up to the opportunities, and I think with the investment, whether you think you need it or you don't, I'm sure we could all benefit with an extra $500,000 in our companies. Just how you're going to use it.
Please form a queue just outside the door, the one where it's marked £500,000 available here. Listen, the pair of you, Michael, thank you very much indeed. It's been
so much, Steve.
Been lovely having you back on the program, and really
great.
Interesting. And Luke as well, thank you very much indeed just for your politeness alone. It was just a real insight. So thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, if you do want to find out more, you can go along to their website. The website, once again, is mjbconsultancy.com. Everything you need to know about what they offer. And the other business, the sales development business, is still operating, isn't it?
Still growing.
And the website for that is
www.mjbgraham.com.
It's a laugh, isn't it? Listen, to the pair of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us on today's edition of Business Connections Live. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Two great guests, and we thoroughly enjoyed having them on the programme. We've got a cracking show lined up for you next week as well. Ian Dixon, speaker and coach about learning the power of ABCD in business, probably tying very nicely with what we did today. So that's Ian Dixon next week. Coming on future programmes, Grant Leboff, Sticky Marketing Club, Paul Glynn, Sandler M25 West is going to be joining us. So don't forget, if you want to find out more details of how you could have a programme just like this one, why don't you get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live until we do it all again next week. Go on, just run those titles. Till we do it all again next week, from me, Steve Hunt, and my guest on the day's programme. Thank you very much indeed for watching. And don't forget, back again next Monday live at 12 noon. Till then, have a great week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.